Perfect.
Cursed be the ground for our sake. Both thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for us. For out of the ground we were taken for the dust that we are, and to the dust we shall return. The From the Dust podcast features people who have had life-changing experiences. Here they share their stories and testimonials about how God can move and change a person's life. Welcome to the From the Dust podcast. Take a listen. Open your hearts and ears. Here's your host, James Science.
Yeah. Welcome back to another edition of From the Dust podcast. I'm your host, James Science. If you have a story or testimony you want to share, go ahead and hit me. But From the Dust podcast at Outlook.com. That's From the Dust podcast at Outlook.com. Stories need to be told and voices need to be heard. Well, today we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to go live and see how it is. With my guest today, he has a very similar podcast, man, with inspiring stories, man. A lot of good input, a lot of good knowledge, man. And there's a lot of substance if you listen to it, man. And I've known him for a while, about a year. We've been in a podcast group, just helping each other out. You know, help me out when I need some help. And he's going to share his story about prison and drugs, and what he's went through and why he started his podcast. So let's go ahead and Sean, how are you now? He's the host from Nowhere to Go Up podcast. How are you, man?
I'm good, brother. I'm good. Thank you for having me on your show. We've been trying. Well, I've been wanting to do this with you and doing a collaboration for a while because we're kind of in the same lane. The only difference is that the faith-based. Mine's not a faith-based. Not that there's anything against faith-based. I'm more of a universe guy. Same thing though. It's easy. It's easier for me to digest universe than it is the other thing. Man, thank you. I love what you're doing, man, and we need more of it. You know, we're at a point in our I guess societally, we're at a point where we need a lot more positive stuff coming out to combat the negative that's being thrown at us all the time.
Yeah, what's cool is I like your stories, but at a point in time I was doing this and I kind of hit a rut, man. You know what I mean? And I had to think about what I wanted to put out there and what I was doing, if I was doing the right thing. And I went back and started listening to your episodes, man, and what you went through. And that got me back going and gets back on, because it took a dive, man, and it didn't get old. It got hard. And knowing that I was listening to your episodes and knowing that you had to go through the battle too, so it just gave me my inspiration to get back down there and get these episodes and get these voices and these stories heard, man.
Yeah, and that's how it works, right? That's the amazing thing about podcasts, that and I would imagine that it had to feel somewhat like our parent or grandparents' generation, where they grew up listening to the radio, right? And that's all they had before television and all that other stuff. But when you're listening to it, for me, in my earphones or with just actively listening to it, it changed my life, man. It changed my thinking. I can't explain it, man. It's really hard to explain, and I don't know why it's so impactful, but it has been. And I think it's just, when I was listening to it when I first started, it was, 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, from my commute to work, while I'm at work, because I work by myself, and on the way home. And I was listening to Rogan and, all the, things that spurred off from listening to him, and, all the different directions you go once you go down rabbit holes with podcasts, right? With a particular show, it just, you'll listen to something, you'll hear somebody, you go, oh man, I got to hear them. And you go and you follow to where they're at, you check out their show, and you're like, oh man, then the same thing, they'll have somebody, and it just keeps going and going and going. Right. But it's, I'm honored that I was able to help you, and that, listening to me was beneficial to you to keep going, because it is tough. This isn't easy. It seems like it. when you're listening to Joe Rogan and Jamie's back there doing all the work, right? And he's just talking, and it seems like, oh, I could just get a microphone, I can talk, I could do that. Man, it's not that easy.
Oh man, it's I remember first starting, dude. Like I didn't know what I was doing, but I went and did it, and I started realizing the more I did it, the more comfortable I got, and the more easier it was to talk with the guests and share stories.
Yeah, that's really what I've learned the most about by having guests is learning how to communicate in a way that really, because I used to talk in a certain way, right? I had a certain dialect. I would say certain phrases all the time, like, you know what I mean? Or we all have one. We all have a go-to phrase that, like, we've, in our mind, felt like that was the cool thing to say, right?
Yeah.
And we've adopted it. And when going through listening and listening to my episodes and editing and all that other stuff, I'd go, oh man, I don't like that, I don't like the way that I sound, and so it really forced me to change it, and really work on, like, all right, I gotta not say that word, I gotta not say so many I even went as far as going to join Toastmasters, which is a speaking type of group that almost every city has, or county or area, they have one. And so I joined that just so I could try to get rid of the ums and learn how to pause instead of saying and it's gotten better, but it's still it's a second nature thing, man. It's so easy to want to use that as a crutch to kind of pause, I guess. So
this is where we're talking about podcasts and what brought us here. Your story, man. Let's get into your story. I know you did some time in prison. You shared that in your episode, and you had some drug use. Let's get into why we're here and while we do our podcast. What was your life like growing up?
Well, I grew up in a broken home. My parents divorced when I was about 5. I acted out after that, and I got in a lot of trouble. Was just using, I guess, any trouble or any attention was good attention in my mind. I didn't take to it very well, and they didn't act very well either. They used me as like the pawn to get back at each other. So I would go to my dad's and I'd hear all this negative stuff about my mom. He dropped me off, I'd be horrible to her, and it was just back and forth. I'd gotten into some trouble when I was in 3rd grade. My mom kept the house. She had me in daycare in the city, next city over. She worked in San Francisco, and so she had to commute back and forth. She had long days, but she tried to keep us in the house, right, that we grew up in. She bought my dad out. We lived in a middle class neighborhood. Didn't have a lot of money, but weren't poor, if that makes any sense. We were taken care of. I didn't have all the things that my other friends had, that they were better off financially, but I had a good life. And for some reason I just I couldn't, I don't know what it was. I just wasn't happy about what I was going through, and I was a bully. I got thrown out of daycare. I think in the 3rd grade, I picked a rock up, and there were some kids in the backfield walking, and I threw the rock at them. Well, it was a dirt clod. I didn't know it had a rock inside of it, but I threw it and ended up hitting the girl right in her eye right here, and split her open. And so they kicked me out of that. And at that point, I became a latchkey kid, and that was a horrible idea. Whoever came up with the latchkey program, kids should not be taking care of themselves, that's for sure, at least not in the third grade. And so that's what life was like. I went through a lot of moving back and forth, getting kicked out of other schools. I got expelled from 7th grade, 8th grade. I think I got kicked out of 3 junior highs, and I was allowed to come back to the other one, and ended up getting kicked out of that towards the end of the year. I had straight Fs, but they were like, you know what, just go home. We don't want to have nothing to do with you anymore. Just go home. It's 2 weeks before school was about to be out, and they socially promoted me to the 9th grade. 9th grade, got in some trouble. Started meth. It wasn't meth then. It was crank. And it was, that was the first time I started messing with that. I continued that relationship off and on for 18 more years after that. And along with about 18 different institutions, from rehabs to prison to jails to juvenile halls, the boys ranch, even did an outward bound program in Palm Desert or Joshua Tree. And my mom spent countless amounts of money trying to fix me, trying to figure out what the problem was. And so it just, that's kind of the way that my life went, all the way up until, I got sent to prison when I was in my early 30s. Did a couple of geographicals, went from the Bay Area to Sacramento for 6 years, went to Vegas for 6 years, caught my case in Vegas, came back, caught my case in 2004, got out in 2006, transferred from, and I ended up doing federal and state time. There's a whole bunch of stories wrapped up in that, but we don't have time for all that. And so I ended up paroling back out to, I went and did my state time, and I paroled out to my federal sentence, got out 2006, released to my mom's back in Pinole in the Bay Area, and did okay for a little while. But I mean, I had PTSD. I didn't like trying to, so I ended up paroling back, decompress from that, because everything's segregated there. I was in a medium, so I mean, it was still not as bad as it would be in a maximum security or a high security prison, but it was still there. You couldn't eat with another race. You couldn't eat after another race. You couldn't take food from another race. You couldn't, do a lot of things. And so you just get this mentality where you just don't like other races. And it was hard to shake that, and plus some of the violence that you have to, that got inflicted on me, and some of the violence that I had to inflict on other people. You had to decompress from that. You were always on heightened alert, because you never really knew if something was going to pop off or not. You just always had that. And so, I mean, that's what the PTSD actually was. And so I stayed drunk for 6 months after that. And somehow, I mean, I got away with it. I mean, with parole and everything else. But I mean, at one point I had to stop. I just stopped cold turkey. I was like, man, this has got to stop. I got to change this. I'm just going down a spiral,
Yeah.
And I did. And I, had the shakes and all that stuff. I slept for like 3 days, had the sweats the whole time. And it was kind of harsh, man. And got through it. In 2000, I had a few other jobs, here and there. I hadn't started using again. In 2007, I ended up joining my union as an apprentice for the heat and frost insulators. Basically, we're you insulate mechanical insulation, so like all of the stuff that's above the drop ceilings in commercial buildings, we insulated a lot of the piping and the HVAC. And so around 2008, 2009, when the financial crisis hit, I was back using again. I got unemployed, and I had married somebody for all the wrong reasons. I was getting unemployment. I was getting the maximum amount, and that's the first time that ever happened. But I mean, I had too much time on my hands. You know what I mean? My girlfriend or my wife at the time was going to work every day. I'm sitting at home. I know where dope is. I've stayed away from it, but at some point I found my way right back to it, and I ended up going AWOL from my marriage for 3 months. Just disappeared. Was doing crime and white collar crime at this point. Doing checks and stuff like that, IDs, making them myself, and I was introduced to another person because when I knew that there was things that I still wanted to do criminally, right? I wasn't done. And in 2006, when I got out, I knew that there was other stuff that I wanted to do. And when I started using it again, I was like, all right, I need to find what it is that I'm searching for. And I did. I found somebody that was doing the kind of crime that I wanted to do. And we linked up, and he taught me everything that he knew. And it's had to do with making credit cards and IDs and all the stuff that goes along with that. From buying all the information from Russia over Bitcoin, using Bitcoin on the dark web, all that stuff that they talked about back in those days that we were doing it. And at some point, it was getting hot, and we had to break it up. And the money was running out. My luck was running out. I was starting to come out of this stupor, like, all right, well, where am I going to go now? What am I going to do now? I still got this life over here that I disappeared from, right? And so I ended up making my way back, tried to, manipulate and do all the things that I used to do. I ended up, I think I got a violation, did a 90-day treatment center. That's a whole nother story. I was dirty, but I had a synthetic urine, so they didn't catch it, and they didn't have an actual staff member watching me. They had one of the clients there, and so I mean they're not going to look. So I was able to get away with it, but they knew I was high. My PO knew something was wrong and something was off, and so she violated me again, and I had to go do sit another 90 days at the county jail this time. And so that was a lot different than going to a rehab, because I'm like, all right, well, I know what county's like, and it's not. The county's more dangerous than prison sometimes, because you don't have any rules really. There's no politics, or the politics that are there are from people that really probably haven't been to prison. They just maybe had somebody coming through that was at prison, so they heard a story about what prison was like, and now they're trying to recreate that in the county jail. You know what I mean? And so I was like, well, if I'm going to go there, then I'm going to need to stop getting high, and I'm going to need to stop smoking, because I don't want to be kicking and being vulnerable while I'm there. And so a month before I went, I stopped doing all of that, and just kept it rolling when I got out in 90 days. I started doing things that were building my self-esteem and my confidence, instead of doing doing things that were tearing it down, right? Like all the manipulation, all the bad behavior that goes along with addiction and using, the lying, the cheating, the stealing, the abusive behavior, whether it's mental or verbal. I was never much of a physical abuser, but I was very much a verbal and mental one. I knew that if I hit you, or if I put marks or bruises on you, then I could probably go to jail. But if I just beat you down verbally, I don't have to worry about it, And that's often cases the worst kind of abuse, because I don't know if anybody out there has ever experienced this, but I mean, if somebody hits me, yeah, I might bruise, but it'll go away, right? But somebody beats me up verbally and tells me all these bad things about myself, that stays. Doesn't go away, man.
It sure does. When, I'm glad you brought that up. When did you realize that you're that type of abuser? Like, what made you? What figured you? How did you figure it out? Because I know I've heard stories of, and I've seen women get beat. But I've seen the most lasting effects are the ones that are verbally and mental abuse. How did you figure that out?
Well, it wasn't until my last relationship, my daughter's mom that I co-parent with currently. I had known that I was before, but I was still in that manipulative, you know what I mean? Not willing to take a look at it, even though the drugs and all that stuff were gone. You know, that disappeared in 2010, and 2016, I was still, floundering around, and then I got with my ex, and it wasn't until I had my daughter, and it was seeing her hiding in the furthest point of the house because I'm yelling and we're fighting, and thinking back to, like, man, well, this must have been what it was like when I was a kid and my dad was yelling and my parents were fighting and all of that, right? And so it happened one more time after that, and it was after we'd already separated, and I'd been out, and we decided to take our daughter to see Santa or something together, because we still wanted to kind of have some sort of semblance of normalcy. You know what I mean? That, hey, look, we're not together, but we're still here for you, and we're still doing things together and showing up. It's not going to be like we hate each other and I'll never be in the same room with you ever again, or come to a party, or, any of that stuff that together. And we were arguing again, and she was probably about, I would say about 2 years old, maybe 2.5. I'm leaning more towards 2. I think that's what it was. And from out of nowhere in the back of the car, she's like, "Stop." And I was like, oh, she knows what's up. You know what I mean? She knows what's going on. And I'm like, this is it. I can't do this anymore. And then another part that really, really affected me is I have a dog, and like, this dog is awesome. I've never had a relationship with an animal like this, right? And like, I love this damn dog. And whenever my octaves start raising, he darts and goes and hides. So my anger and my rage and my verbal abuse and yelling and all that other stuff, I scarred my dog. You know what I mean? My dog has PTSD because of me. And so that's really kind of, the two things where I was like, dude, you got to change, man. And if that means no relationships because you just can't seem to get it right. And I actually jumped out of one. I started dating somebody, and, we drank a little bit too much, and, I'm not in recovery. I just don't mess with the things that I can't mess with, right? Like pills and methamphetamine and stuff like that. But I'll still have a drink occasionally. I'll microdose THC for pain instead of taking pills now. And so what had happened was, I guess I got angry and started, being verbally abusive after I drank too much. And I was like, you know what? I got to go. Sorry. I never, I just broke up and never, kind of whatever. I was so afraid and scared that, like, damn, here he comes again. You know what I mean?
I asked that because it took me a long time, since we're talking about co-parenting, and I talked about, I didn't get too deep, well, the guess I'm going to have in, but it took me a while, bro, like, to realize, how angry I can get. And then when you would see I would see my kids, like they would be scared, I realized that I could be hurting them, and what I'm doing can brush off on them and potentially harm them, and when they have a family, so it took me a lot, but when I realized it, it made me want to change, and that's what propelled me to do better, and to co-parent with my ex as well.
Yeah, and having a daughter too, I was like, all right, well, if I'm being like this and she's seeing this, then maybe like what's going to happen when she gets old enough to where she's dating somebody and she's in the same situation and she thinks back to like well, that's just normal, man. My parents did that all the time. But it's not normal. You know what I mean? It's not normal. People shouldn't communicate that way. People shouldn't treat each other that way. And by me exiting when I did, I was trying to eliminate her seeing that as a normal thing and being able to maybe instill in her what a healthy relationship's supposed to look like at some point. That way, when she is old enough, and she's 3.5 now, that she'll have a good example and or know that this isn't the way things are supposed to be, and maybe I should nix this one. Maybe I should bolt. Maybe this isn't the right relationship for me. So I mean, a lot of that is in there.
Being able to co-parent, like we were talking about earlier that we want to do an episode. Might as well kind of we can get out and do it now. Because I co-parent, and it was hard for me at first to see, like, because now when I co-parent, I say I co-parent because when we do things, it's not just me, it's my ex, and it's the one she's with, because she has a kid with him, and they were with them since they were small, so it's a family thing, So when I say co-parent, it's a whole group. How are things like that? Because I'm able to go to, like, we can do birthdays and Christmases and be fine. And did that take you some time to do, or were you able to do that off the bat?
See, it hasn't got to that point yet. So we're right at the phase, all right, of where I'd been dating other people, and she kind of had been, I think, as well, but there had been no introductions up to a certain point. It was like, all right, well, if like I want to know who like, especially I have a daughter. I mean, it's not. I don't think it's as vital. You know what I mean? Just because of the situation, what can happen with a daughter, inappropriate stuff, I mean, I don't know the guy, so I wanted to at least be able to meet him and, do all that. But I mean, that didn't happen. But I was able to check out his Facebook page, and he's got kids. He's got a daughter, and a son, and he seems like a decent dude. So I was like, all right, I'll settle for that. She hasn't met my girlfriend yet, but we have a good relationship together. That's the funny thing. Like she went on a vacation, to Maui, and I have a dog, she has a dog, but the dog that she has, we both got together. And so, I mean, it's kind of my dog, and we share them, right? Like when she leaves, I take the dog and watch her, watch like Zoe. And so I ended up having to stay at her house because it was a lot easier she had all of her stuff there and everything else. So, I mean, we're cool like that, as long as we stick to my daughter and don't get into us.
Yeah.
Or what, who did what wrong, or, fall into those old patterns of behavior. And we haven't in a while. But there was a point where, I mean, it would be good. And then it would, somebody would, make a smart ass comment, and there goes, bam, flare that right up.
Yeah.
And, but once she started dating somebody, more seriously, it started easing up on me, So the more she had something else to focus her attention on, instead of all the things that maybe I wasn't doing right, or frustrations of why it didn't work, or any of those things that can come up. And it's not easy. It was kind of difficult for me when I knew that, like, when my daughter started saying some other dude's name.
Yeah, it was weird for me.
I was like, what? Don't be talking about that dude in front of me. And I started going there, right? And then I'm like, dude, you're doing what your parents did to you. You know what I mean? And it's like, so now I don't even really trip on it. I'm just like, I don't say nothing bad about the guy. If she wants to talk about him, then I'm not going to be like, don't say that name. I just roll with it.
That one took me a while. Like my youngest son, the dude came in since he was 1, so he calls him dad. And that when I first said it, I was like, that ain't your dad, but warming up, like seeing that it is that because he helped raise him. So that was the biggest obstacle I needed to overcome. And man, I'm glad I got through it, because when I can be bitter, I can be a real bitter person, and you don't want to be around me when I'm a real bitter person. Through everything, through the prisons and the drug use, what made you want to put your voice out there, man, and do the podcast?
Well, there's a few different things. One, Joe Rogan made it look easy. That was first, because he always was saying, you should start a podcast. All the time, he always talks about that. And so I would start listening to him. I'm like, all right, well, I got a story. I've been through some unique stuff. I've been through, a lot of different institutions, almost died 5 times. 3 of them were ODs. One was a vehicular thing, and the other one was when I got raided. I had a gun on me, and when I came around the corner, the SWAT team was right there, and I ditched it behind the TV where they couldn't see. The TV was one of those big ones, and the door was kind of blocking where I was, but I saw the shields, and so in one motion, I dove on the ground and I threw the gun down, and they didn't see it. Had they, that would have been a wrap. So yeah, I've gotten really lucky. And so I wanted to be able to tell those stories, and I wanted to be able to hear other people's stories, of their bottoms and their life struggles and how they got through it. And as the show progressed, I started moving into a little bit of variety. It started sort of taking on my own personality. And I started getting people on that would help me address the issues that I was still struggling with, because I'm cheap, right? I don't want to pay for a coach. I don't want to pay for a mentor. So I was like, all right, well, let me see if I could hack this and just bring somebody on and, let them be exposed to my listeners and my audience. And in turn, I'll ask them the questions that I'm struggling with, and hopefully I'll get some answers. If not, then I'll maybe get a direction of, who else I can talk to, or what other person I can go and find to have on the show to help me through whatever it is I'm struggling with. And then it turned into other stuff like criminal justice reform, getting into some of the alternative media stuff that I listen to, calling out corruption, and being a signal booster and amplifying the signal of other people that are calling out corruption. I've had I've had a lot of different folks on my show. Not only just people that have struggled through things, but ex-NFL player I just recently had on, a federal attorney. I had some actors. I've got like 3 or 4 actors still in my queue that I need to get out. Doctors. I had an oncologist on that hasn't been released yet. What else? Producers of true documentary series producers. Just a lot of different folks, man. And it's really taught me a lot. Not only has it taught me how to talk and how to be a conversationalist and keep a conversation going, but it's taught me how to listen too, and be able to listen to somebody and have a true volley, and not try to talk over somebody or be thinking about what I want to say to where I'm not listening to that person fully, because I'm in a hurry to get out my point, So it's taught me a lot, and I've been really open to learning a lot. It's opened a lot of doors for me. I've started a nonprofit. I'm a 501c3 now that I've kind of wanted to help guys that are coming out of incarceration and reentering the community. I wanted to focus on adults, but as I've been doing my market research, the need in my county is for transitional age youth, 18 to 25. And so that's the direction I'm going to be going forward. And I'm working on, I've got a board meeting here pretty soon where I'm going to be, trying to figure out who I want on my board and how to strategize it. I don't know anything about how to do any of this stuff, but
Yeah, but you got the heart, though. That's cool. And the drive.
Well, thank you. But it was through this podcast that made it possible, right? Because before it was even a thought, I'd been thinking about it, and I interviewed somebody that had a nonprofit and, doing what I do. I'm asking questions. Oh, how'd you start that? How hard was it? What do you do? All this other stuff. And she hooked me up with her attorney who did hers for free, and she did mine for free. And so she did all the paperwork and all the legal stuff, which is like a $2,500, $3,000 cost. You know what I mean? If you're going to pay an attorney outright. And so all of these things just were lining up for me. And, I was able to capitalize on those and use them, to try to help me to help other people. And when I first started this journey, I wanted to be popular. I wanted to be Joe Rogan. I thought I was going to make, a bunch of money, and I could do this and I can do that. And I had to stop and think, well, why are you here? You say you want to help people, but if that's what you're looking for, you're just wanting to help yourself then, right? And so I had to take a deep look at that and go, okay. And self-reflection is really important, and the ability to be able to self-reflect and to see your faults and to see where you're falling short, right? To see, your blind spots in your behavior and how you deal with other folks and your thinking. That's important. And listening to people and taking feedback, that's important too. Responding instead of reacting, that's huge. When you can figure out how to respond to things instead of react emotionally to them, respond intelligently instead of reacting emotionally, that's half the game right there, right? All of that was made possible by having this podcast. Being able to see all that, being able to... there was one thing I did. I went to. Here's one story, and then I'll turn it back to you. So, I was involved in this reentry project group, and it was basically talking about best practices and stuff like that of different things that are working and not working in the communities for people that are reentering, or people they're coming from incarceration and coming back to the communities. So I had somebody who sent me a TED Talk from a guy by the name of David DeRocher, and it was titled "Criminals Reforming Criminals." And I listened to it, and I was moved. It was about 18 minutes long. I was just like, oh my God, this dude is just spot on. He's talking about everything that I want to talk to him. I want to find him. I want to meet him. So I went and started looking for him. And within 40 minutes, I'd found him, made contact with him, got a phone appointment with him, and then talked to him for about a half hour. We kind of lined up and everything, right? And he was is an executive director for a therapeutic community up in Utah. And so I got him on the show. We had the podcast. It was great. A lot of information. The guy's a really good storyteller. He's a good speaker. I explained to him at the end of what I was doing and what I was trying to do, and that there was a therapeutic community that he knew about in my area, and if he could set up a like for me to go tour it and see like how their operation is. And he was like, yeah, they probably won't. And plus with COVID is not probably going to happen. Plus they're not very forthcoming or, just like open about how they run their program. And he said, but if you want to come up to Utah, I'd be more than willing to take you through mine, and show you everything about what we're doing here and all of that. And so I drove up there. It was 13 hours, I believe, one way. I drove there straight shot to get there, immersed myself in his program for 3 days. I stayed in the same kind of rooms that they did. I went and ate dinner with them and ate in all my meals with them. We went out a couple times, but for the most part, I was, interacting with the students. And I went to their groups. I went to their, I was just a part of everything. And he showed me all of his, how their social enterprises run everything. And they were fully self-funded. They didn't have any money that they took from the state, the government, or anything. All the students were able to stay there for free. You just had to sign up for 2.5 years. And then you started working with the social enterprises, with the moving company or the thrift store. So you're paying your way, right? You're working for your stay, basically. You're getting a skill, you're learning how to reintegrate with society, and you're changing behaviors. And you can't change behaviors like that in a prison. Because what it takes in prison to change behavior is people calling out your behavior, right? You try calling out someone's behavior in prison and see what happens. It's not going to be a good day for you. And so that's why it doesn't work. Going to prison, it works for your outside and you can get buff and you can work out and, you look great on the outside. But usually when we get out, we're still toxic inside, right? We haven't done anything to deal with that. And so that's why this program was so amazing to me, because it reminded me of when I was in one when I was 16. I went to a therapeutic community as a group home for getting in trouble. I ended up being there for 16 months. And it was, for whatever reason, man, it was just something that I needed to be in. I needed to see. I needed that check, that reality check, right? And it made me super grateful for what I had and, where I was at. And, a lot of times I knock myself because of where I've been and that I'm not as far along as other people, my age. And, I had to just stop and think for a second, man. You got a lot to be grateful for. You got a beautiful daughter. You've got an opportunity to do it right, because I have another daughter that I lost my parental rights to. She's about 21. I'm going to be 22 the end of February, she'll be 22. But I got an opportunity to do it right? And be the father to this one that I couldn't be to that one. And it made me be grateful for a lot of things and looking at things a lot differently. And so that's kind of where we're at right now. I glossed over a lot because there's a lot in my story. But I mean, that's kind of the condensed version of it. And then the podcast, it just, like I said, it keeps growing,
I noticed the difference when you're getting a lot of people with a lot of big voices, man, that are doing a lot of things. And it's true. Nowhere to go but up, man. You were at the bottom, man. Drugs, prison, nowhere to go, man. And here we are with the successful podcast and nonprofit. What's next? Sky's the limit, right?
Yeah, I mean, all it takes is the ability to think it, see it, dream it, and just start to be it. If you can see it, you can be it.
It's true testament. Like this podcast is just beginning. Man, if I could, I want to look into doing gang intervention, because I did gang intervention for a while when I was down south, man. And over here, they have no programs. You know, sometimes a lot of these kids, why not because of COVID, but there's a lot of kids getting in trouble, man, with no direction and really nowhere to go, and no one steer them in the right direction. And out there, it's a big city, so of course they got all the fun and they got all the people. But what about, small town where I'm at in it's county, man, and hopefully, we can come up with some programs or find the right people just to bring these kids in, man, and steer them in a better direction, because prison and gangs, that's not going to help, man. But either they don't got to go with the faith for as long as they make that change and do better. That's my goal, man. I'm going to look into that and hopefully find the right people to steer us through and get something going.
Yeah, you know what you can do? Check out some of the programs that they have already for them, and see if anybody's teaching podcasting. Teach them a skill. That's what I plan on doing with mine. Is I'm going to add podcasting to it, and
Not about that.
yeah, and then let whatever it is, if it ends up being a home or a facility that we end up starting, there's going to be a podcast element to that, a studio, where they're going to be able to learn how to start a show from start to finish, the editing, all the stuff that goes into it, and it's going to be their show. It's going to be the Nowhere to Go But Up Project podcast.
Yeah.
And they're going to be in control of it. And they're going to be able to get their self-esteem back, their voice back, and see how powerful being a voice in media can be. How powerful it is when you can have an NFL player come onto your show and talk about things that you want to talk about, right? And you don't need a gun for that. You know what I mean? You don't need a weapon for that. You don't need drugs for that. That's the kind of self-esteem and building and goal setting and stuff that we missed. And we didn't learn. I didn't learn, at least, because I was too busy trying to get around doing things and working hard. And so that's the one thing that I think that we all have the ability to do. And you just reach out to your local YMCA or another one, place that's like that, that's already doing work, already has a facility, and then go in and see if you can offer your services. And it's like, hey man, I just want to try this out. I want to see if we can start a podcast, and just kind of, mess around with it. Have a plan, of course.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? But turn what you already love doing into something you can teach somebody else to love how to do too. And not everybody's going to like it. Not everybody's going to love it, but you're going to get one or two that are going to take to it, and you're going to reach them in a way that no one else has reached them before. And you're going to give them that incentivization to want to progress, and you start giving them goals, and they start achieving them, and they start realizing that, hey man, I can do something else. And now I'm going to level that goal up, and then I'm going to go and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to just keep leveling up until I get to where I want to be.
Yeah, there'll be a goal of mine, man, with my next list, because I want to start the podcast, and I knew after the podcast I wanted to start something else, and maybe that'll be the thing, man, to give something to give back to the people I'm listening, to give back to the community, and to do something good.
Because that's really where it falls. It falls within our communities. All the stuff that we are watching in the national scene and all that stuff that's going on in politics and everything else, man. How much of that really affects your community? You know what I mean? Your county, your city, your neighborhood. So let's look at it this way. Let's just say, God help, that this doesn't happen. But let's just say that we ended up in some sort of a civil war or revolution, right? Well, who are you going to have to depend on? You're going to have to depend on your neighbors in your neighborhood. And you're going to have to depend on the people to, help each other and defend your neighborhood, right?
Right.
And so, stop. I mean, it's a good time to start learning who your neighbors are and going over and saying hello. How's it going? I'm so and so. It's good to meet you. Make a relationship. Because you never know when you're going to need that person. You're going to need that neighbor to help you. Times aren't certain right now. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's for sure. And they're getting little hair. I mean, with everything going on, they're getting a little crazy, dude.
So
don't know who to trust. Don't know who to turn to, but just trusting God, and whoever has our countries in, just know that if it's in God's favor, and we're gonna be all right. Yeah. Now, where anybody that's listening to this, watching, where can they find any of your podcasts? I would encourage them to go check it out because you got a lot of content. And where can they find you?
I'm all over. I'm on YouTube. I have a Facebook group that's got a lot of my content in there. It's got other people's content that I think that is relevant to my mission and what I'm about. You can go to. I think the easiest way to find me is probably going to my link tree, which is linktr.ee/nowhere to go but up. I'm on all the major podcast platforms and all the little ones too. Like I said, YouTube, I've got tons of content out there. I do a live stream almost every week now. I do quite a bit of them, honestly. I've got tons of content that still needs to come out in my queue. I've got about 47 episodes there that I still need to release. This week I've got 4 more live streams. Thursday I got one at 6, I got one at 7, and I got one at 8. I've got I think the one at 8 is a documentary filmmaker. She did the movie called The Vanishing Bees, all about the problems and with the pesticides and everything else, and why our bee population is dying off. And so that's going to be a really good one. I've been looking forward to that. I got you on Friday.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Yeah, I got you coming on Friday. We're talking a little bit about your story and
sure. I'm getting used to talking about my story, so it'd be good, man. I can't wait.
Yeah. I'm interested. I can't wait to hear that. So yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to put out as much content as I possibly can. At some point, I'm going to be ended up going back to work. Probably within about 6 weeks, I should be back. I'm having surgery on my elbow on the 25th. So 6 weeks after that, I should be back to work. So I'm trying to do as much as I can and get everything set so where it's not going to be as difficult to manage. But who knows, man? I'm really trying to. I mean, the nonprofit is to help other people, but at the same time, it's also to try to bring in enough money to maybe take a salary and do that full time. I don't know how quickly that's going to be, but I mean, at some point, that's what the goal is to be doing podcasting and working on the nonprofit and helping these guys out is going to be a full-time gig. So. And it's not about money. I could care less. Just as long as my basic needs are taken care of, I've kind of sworn off the money. When COVID hit, I was able to spend a lot more time with my daughter, and I was on a trajectory to be a business agent in my union, and that would require me spending a lot of time away from my daughter. And the more time I spent with her, I was like, you know what? I'm not willing to sacrifice this anymore. This is way too important, and the fact that we're not together normally, it makes it even more important, to have that time and be able to spend that time and be involved in shaping her personality and the person that she's becoming. I want to be involved in that. And so, this was part of the reason why I dove so hard in creating the content and everything else, because I'm trying to figure out a way to pivot out of that. But I also want to leave a legacy for her too. And in this podcast, she's going to be able to go back and listen to all my episodes, when I'm gone, and be able to go, man, my dad stood for something.
Yeah, and that's my thing too. That's why I did it too. All my kids to go back and listen. You know, my dad did. He was doing something. He was trying to make a change. You know, they listen. You know, they fool around, but sometimes they talk how I talk. You know, they think me, but they're listening and they got something to look back. You know when it was all said and gone, they don't have their dad, but they got their dad's voice.
Yep.
They got his videos, and they got something to share and keep with them.
They got your wisdom too, man.
And I try. You know, what it's fun because when kids were smaller and we would go through the drive-through and stuff like that, and you know obviously there's people without food or a home, you know, and they would ask for for money or food, so I would go and buy it. So my kids start, hey, without even asking for them asking dad, I'm gonna give my food as soon as we see them, you know. So it's rubbed off and it's rubbing off, and I just hopefully that they get my heart. I want to help people hear the stories and share them, you know. So, you know, maybe they might not do them in this house, but you know what? My dad had a podcast. Check it out, and just to share the love, man, and the life of just trying to live good.
And they may want to follow in your footsteps. You know what I mean? You can teach them. Like my daughter, she's always jumping on my lap. Daddy, you want to put on? I want to talk on your podcast. You know, I want to be on your podcast. And so, I mean, at some point, I'll probably end up starting one for her. You know?
Yeah, my daughter. Well, I got 4, 2 and 2, but my middle child, Jeannie, she's all about the life. You know, music, ukuleles, and actually, at the end, her voice is on my outro. You know, she wanted to do it, but I didn't know how to fit them in. You know, didn't know what type of show it was going to be, but I figured it out, and you know, we sometimes once in a while we'll do a word of the night, and she keep asking me, when are we going to do it again? You know, so it's there, you know, and they're catching it, and hopefully it just stays.
Yeah, for sure, man.
So and before we go and we close, anybody that's, you know, whoever listening, man, they were in your shoes at one time, and you know, are they want to do what you're doing? You know, what words of wisdom and inspiration can you give them? Just, you know what, I was at the bottom, you know, but look where I'm now. You hit it to the top. What can you tell them?
Don't give up. You know, I just had an episode tonight with a guy who, you know, did 30 years and, you know, had life without the possibility of parole, but he didn't give up, and he persevered and continued to send motions. And, you know, at some point, you know, he got through. And so don't give up. You know, continue to press on. And if you're going to fail forward. Learn from those mistakes. Go back to the drawing board. Figure it out. See how you can remaneuver it and try again. You know, the only way when we ever lose is when we don't learn from our mistakes. And the only way we cannot learn from our mistakes is if we choose to leave here. You know, leave this planet, leave this life, and then that's when we lose. You know, so anytime that you can learn a lesson, it's a win. There's no such thing as losing in my book. You know, everything is a win as long as you're learning from it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Sean, I want to thank you for your time, because it went long, but man, you gave a lot of good nuggets, a lot of wisdom. I want to keep coming on and sharing your story. If you have a story or testimony you want to share, go ahead and hit me from the Dust Podcast at Outlook.com. That's from the Dust Podcast at Outlook.com. Stories need to be told, and voices need to be heard.
Therefore, if any man be in Christ, he is a new creature. Old things are passed away. Behold, all things become new.
From the Dust Podcast, y'all be blessed. Go.